inadequate in some way.
Yeah, and if people are having those options, they're going to get put into one of those slots. I want to figure out how to get people to go do an Occupy Wall Street, or at least knitting, and not buying a gun and murdering 10 people in a grocery store out of racial hatred.
Right.
I think we just have to, really reform how our country is running, and it's not about taking guns away or changing how people access social media, but instead it's about lifting people up into a better economic situation. That is what we know, that crime is connected to economic problems. So I mean, if people are not feeling like they have opportunity, we see this all around the world. It's not just here in the United States. In certain parts of the world where there are groups like ISIS, we see people that when they don't feel like they have opportunity, they do become extremely radical, well beyond any sort of radicalization we see here in this country. So people can be radicalized very easily if they have nothing else to latch onto, like what Robbie is mentioning. And that, I think that is really what we need is more of a discussion of how do we rebuild the middle class? How do we get the American people feeling like there's a future to actually get excited about? That's what we need.
And how do we restore?
I have to speak on this right quick. So in my recommendeds, The Hill came up, and they have, I guess it's like a sub show. I haven't watched The Hill in a while. They kind of turned me off when they were constantly talking about aliens all the damn time. But, The Hill has whatever the sub show called The Rising. I don't know. I just see Rising in the corner, but it's a part of The Hill YouTube channel. And, they got rid of some of the older two people, the Indian dude, I think he is, and, the other white chick that they had on the show. And they got this woman, Kim Iversen, she acts as like the conservative talking head, right? So she's the voice for typically the white conservatives. She was born and raised in Idaho. Her mother's Vietnamese. Her father, it just says an American farmer from what I researched. So just a white man. She grew up in a Buddhist Catholic household, but that's neither here nor there. I'm just giving the background, highlighting the fact that she's not white. She's half white, but she's a talking head for white conservatives. And reading through the comments, I can see that you get these white people that co-sign all this crap, because white people are always trying to find ways to absolve themselves of guilt and white supremacy being called out. And the bias is there, and she's basically carrying the water for white supremacy. So the black woman that was up on the panel, I think her name is Bria or something like that. And so she's basically calling out, what it is. This was clearly hate speech. This was clearly a hateful act. Talking about the mass shooting in Buffalo. This was clearly influenced by hate and racism, white supremacy, white nationalism, and that's what it was. Okay? And Kim comes in, as you're going to hear in a second. Kim comes in and basically says exactly what black people have been saying about young black male youth in the inner city as it pertains to the things that they need. But because we're talking about a white mass shooter, it turns into, it's about, the environment and, not having a positive male identity and, the access to resources. And we got to talk about, the middle class and all this isolation and lack of opportunities it causes, radicalism and all that. Right. This is the direction that she's going in. And I'm sitting there with my jaw on the floor saying to myself, these people that always talk this conservative shit, notice how they would never say anything like that about Chicago. If you start talking about Chicago, it's all, those black kids, they're just like that, and get a job and stop being lazy and personal responsibility. That's all they got to say. But now that we got a white shooter that goes into a supermarket and shoots the supermarket up, now we got to talk about, it's due to the pandemic and COVID and the restrictions and being isolated and mental health issues and not having a positive male identity. All these things I agree with, right? Because if it applies to one, it applies to the other. I agree. I agree that you're going to have more crazies and more emotionally unstable people. And in terms of people's, future and the opportunity of the direction of where they want to go, like that seems less and less of something that people can reach out and touch. So I don't doubt that affects people, but the point that I'm pointing out is the bias and how all of a sudden, this talking point that would never be made about, the violence in Chicago, the black on black crime in Chicago, and the lack of opportunities, and those kids are joining gangs because there are no opportunities, and they're stuck in this bubble, in this cycle of crime and death and pain. Conservatives like Kim would never make that point. They never make that point. I've seen her a couple times, and she gets on my goddamn nerves. This Kim Iversen woman. Never make that point. But when somebody says this is a white nationalist, racist attack fueled by racism and white supremacy, then all of a sudden now she got snap, I gotta carry the water for white supremacy. That's what I'm being paid to be here for. So now I gotta jump up and basically say the same exact thing that black people have been saying since forever that conservatives don't really want to engage in. Now, in order to prevent there from being more mass shooters, instead of talking about racism and white supremacy and talking about the sick pathology of racist and white supremacists, right? We're going to talk about environment and behavior, and how access to resources and environment affects behavior. Same shit that we've been talking about when it comes to, teenage black kids in the inner city and the violence that you see in Chicago and Philadelphia and elsewhere in the country. But because we want to get as far away from it actually being white supremacy and white supremacy being the issue that needs to be addressed, now we're going to pivot, and now we're going to change the conversation and make it about environment and resources and access to things and having a positive male identity and being able to have a future and preventing the middle class from dwindling so that these young white males have hope. Because that's what this really is about. It's not about white supremacy and hatred. No. It's about the environment and the conditions of that environment and how it psychologically affects people, and how if we don't do certain things and establish certain policies that help people get on their feet, and so that they're financially solid, then they'll resort to these sort of negative behaviors. That is never said about inner city black kids. Never, ever, ever, ever. That is never said about inner city black kids coming from anybody who even remotely leans in the conservative direction. But all of a sudden, after this white guy shoots up the damn supermarket, all of a sudden, if I said school, I meant supermarket. All of a sudden, after this guy shoots up the supermarket, now we want to talk about these things that the black community has been saying needs to be addressed and is the root of a lot of these pathological behaviors that you see in the black community. This is why, like, as black people, this is why we come for y'all next. When we want to talk about the system of white supremacy and the talking heads for white supremacy, you know what I mean? This is why, we foam at the mouth when we talk about racism and slavery, because this sort of bait and switch, this sort of low key or high key bias that is always just there. All of a sudden, when the person's white, it's like there's one set of rules for black people and there's one set of rules for white people. And when the person is white, then all of a sudden we want to examine everything else in the room instead of saying that person is just like that. That's just a hateful person. Nope. It's because of environment and this, that, and the third, and Joe Biden's policies and it's the left doing this and the left doing that and the emasculation of boys and everything else like that. Which, again, I agree with all of that shit. However, it's amazing at how the compassion, it's amazing, but it's not surprising. The compassion is there for the white boys that run around here with these sick ass pathologies. But again, inner city black males are not extended that same compassion when it comes to, why they're out there with the drill music and the gangster shit and the gangs and the gun violence and all that other stuff. But when we get to white boys and their sick ass pathology, oh man, it's because there's a shrinking middle class. Like, for real, bitch? For real? Yeah. Carry that water for white Zaddy. Go carry that water. Get the bag, girl. Get the bag. Get your money. Get your money. Anyway, that's all I gotta say. That's my video. SWP out.